Not every team values official 30 visits the same as the rest of the league, but the Seahawks, it has consistently been an indicator for potentially who they could pick in the NFL draft. What do this year's 30 visits mean in terms of Seattle's draft plans? We're going to try to put under sleuth hats here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are listening in. And thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Whether you're in nearby Issaquah, Washington, or if you're in the middle of the country in Kansas City, Missouri, we appreciate each and every one of you. Rob, we are getting close to a week away from the 2025 NFL Draft, and we are closing in on the end of our position-by-position preview. Today, we are talking safeties for this year's draft class. We'll have first rounders, day 2 and day 3 gems. We're also going to take our latest look at Seattle's reported top 30 visits and see what those visits may suggest about the team's draft plans. It is a jam-packed episode brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. As we draw closer and closer to the 2025 NFL Draft, the teams across the league are putting the hay in the barn, wrapping up their official 30 visits. We now know 16 of them for the Seahawks, so a little over half. I expect a few more of those are going to be trickling in. Usually we can get to 20 to 25. A couple years ago, we got all 30, which is the only time that's ever happened. But we should have a pretty good idea which players have come out. And look, this does not mean the Seahawks are going to be drafting these players, but for those that say these visits do not matter, for some teams they don't. Some teams have completely scrapped these 30 visits. The Seahawks are not in that spectrum, though, Rob. 18% of their picks since 2011 have been players that have come out to Seattle for these official visits, and that number could be higher because there are years we didn't get all 30 players. So there might be some guys they drafted that we didn't have documentation that they were out for a visit. This is certainly a key component for John Schneider and his front office. They value this, and looking at this year's list of reported visits so far, it's pretty obvious the Seahawks have 5 picks in the first 92 when you see the players they've got coming in.
Yeah, and the 3 that I've seen here most recently that I thought were especially interesting was the 2 players from Alabama, Jihaad Campbell, the linebacker, Jalen Monroe, the quarterback, as well as Shamar Stewart, the combine superstar that really surprised some people with just how incredibly he worked out. I also see a player like a Savon Ravel, the cornerback from East Carolina. To me, he reminds me a little bit of what happened when the Seahawks, before they drafted him in the second round, brought in former University of Tennessee edge rusher Darrell Taylor, who, of course, was coming off of an injury the same way as Ravel is coming off of an injury as well. I think that especially when you have players who are from an entirely different part of the country, just see how they might acclimate here to the beautiful Seattle area, as well as how they're going to, interact with some of the people, not just the coaches, not just the general manager and the scouts, but some of the other people who are working at the Virginia Mason Athletic Center. And then again, of course, checking out just one more look as far as the medical testing and how these players might be able to fit in with the coaches and the staff here with the Seahawks.
When you look at this list, Rob, and again, we've got 16 of the 30 players that have been reported. I'm the one today that added the name of Jihaad Campbell to the list as well. He was in Seattle. My understanding is he flew out this afternoon. So he most likely had his visit on Monday with the team, but another Alabama player they're looking at. But you look at this list, Jalen Milroe, Teteroa McMillan, Kyle Williams, Savion Williams, Mason Taylor, Chase Lunt, Jared Wilson, Shamar Stewart, another one that was announced today, the athletic edge from Texas A&M. Michael Williams from Georgia, Ty Robinson from Nebraska, Revel. Almost all these guys have a chance to go in the first 3 rounds. Most of the players here, and there have been seasons where we have seen Seattle very rarely bring in players that were going to go in the first 90 picks. But again, they've got 4 selections on day 2, and they've got 5 picks total in the first 92. It makes sense that they are looking at a bunch of players that are going to fall in that realm because they've got a lot of picks in that time. And there's a few players on here. Chase Lunt's kind of one of those players that's in the peripheral. Who knows where he's going to end up going. But there are a lot of players on this list that are early day 3, not very many that are probably going to be going later than that. Now, I'm presuming we're going to find out more of these. There's going to be some players that are clear day 3 or undrafted priority players. There always are. But it is very telling, this list, especially when you look at the offensive side of the ball. And it shouldn't be a surprise that receiver and offensive line are really the 2 biggest represented position groups here. And one thing that I want to make sure that our listeners understand here, Kyle Williams, even though he played at Washington State, the NFL changed the rules this year. Washington State is no longer considered a local school for the Seattle Seahawks, which if you've ever made the drive from Pullman to Seattle, you can maybe understand why. It does feel like you're in a different country when you make that drive. But Washington State players, unless they were born and raised in the Seattle area, those guys do not count as local visits anymore. So Kyle Williams is one of the 30. You've got Savion Williams as well. And Teteroa McMillan, make sure not to call him Tet McMillan. Arizona fans get really upset with that. So it's Teteroa McMillan, projected first-round pick. Seattle is clearly taking a look early at receivers, and those are just the 3 we know. I wouldn't be surprised there's a few others that trickle in before this list is finished up.
Yeah, and again, as you just said, there were several offensive linemen, several wide receivers, but I was surprised that there wasn't more, frankly, at that position. It's a very varied list. And I think that kind of just speaks to the fact that Seattle feels like they are pretty well positioned. And of course, they've brought in several players in free agency. And I think that, again, the 3 players that I mentioned before, Shamar Stewart, and I would add Michael Williams. I didn't realize that he was on this list as well. But between Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams, Jalen Monroe, Teteroa McMillan, and then with Jihaad Campbell, to me, those are all 5 players that I think are going to wind up going possibly in the first round. And so it feels like Seattle is basically doing their due diligence. That they have some players, of course, that they are projecting to be their selection number 18 overall. But if a player that they are surprised that perhaps slips all the way down to them, like a Shamar Stewart, for example, then, oh my goodness, wouldn't you be intrigued if you were the Seattle Seahawks, if you are Mike McDonald, just imagine a guy of that size, that athletic ability, and suddenly he is available to you at number 18 overall, a player with his athletic traits shouldn't be available to them. So just making sure that they know who the young man is in case that he is available to them, surprisingly, and if they should be willing to pounce on that selection and perhaps eschew a bigger position of concern like guard, like wide receiver, and push that to the 2nd or 3rd rounds.
It really does show best player available here because of the variety of different positions that they have here. And again, this is just 16 of the 30. But one last thing I want to point out here, John Schneider does have a history where he, as you mentioned with Darrell Taylor, he's been willing to take a chance on guys coming off of injuries. You have 2 players on this list now because Jihaad Campbell just had surgery last month to repair a torn labrum in his shoulder. So you've got him coming back from that injury, and you've also got Revel Jr. from East Carolina coming off the ACL tear he suffered in practice. So both those guys are coming off significant injuries. They are on this list, though, and I think John Schneider's looking at it as a chance. Hey, what if one or both those guys who have first-round talent slips into the middle of the 2nd round? We've got pick 50, we got pick 52. That may be the sweet spot for them to pick one or both these guys. I would not be surprised if both of them were available if they double dipped and said, hey, they might be banged up or coming off injuries, but these guys are first-round talents, and we're getting them in the 2nd round at a discount. John Schneider has done that in the past. So I think that is something else that really stands out here when you're looking at the list. But as far as trying to peg what John Schneider's going to do, you and I, we don't have a crystal ball in front of us that is going to say exactly what happens. But this definitely shows me that they are doing, as you said, their due diligence on these guys that are going to be available the first 3 rounds, because that's where their draft capital is at. 5 picks in the first 92, and they are making sure they are looking at the best player available opportunity, where you got linebackers, edge rushers, defensive tackles. Those players are being looked at closely. They could be first and second round targets, because they're looking for guys that can get their team over the hump, more so than just trying to plug needs on the roster. When we come back, we are going to continue our position by position draft preview. We're going back to the secondary with a rock solid safety group. We're going to be diving into just first rounders, because there could be as many as 3 that hear their name called in the first round coming up next week. We'll dive into that up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on entertainment subscriptions. Now I'm budgeting smarter and saving more. Instead of juggling multiple streaming services, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals, and make sure that you're not overspending for some of those entertainment needs. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s that are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out our friends over at the Locked On NFL Draft, Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. We're closing in on the draft. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Continuing our draft coverage here on Locked On Seahawks, Rob, we are closing on the finish line here in terms of position by position in-depth scouting reports and review. We're going back to the secondary today at the safety spot. And I will admit, when I really started diving deep into this year's draft class in December and January, safety was not a position that was on my radar as being one of the strengths in this draft class. But the deeper that I have gotten into draft scouting, into watching the film, the combine numbers, this is a sneaky good safety class, particularly at the top. I don't know if it's the deepest position group that you're going to find, but there's some really good talent available in the first 3 rounds, including potentially as many as 3 safeties that could go in the first 32 picks next week.
Well, I think that you have to start the conversation off with Nick Emmanwori. I mean, again, just like how we were talking about before with Shamar Stewart, a player that just was so incredible during the combine session that I think that he's somebody that the Seahawks are going to have to consider. The same thing here. I don't think that safety is the biggest area of concern for the Seahawks on defense, much less their entire team. I think that you have to make a real strong argument that you are going to be, addressing some of your other positions of concern with one of those, or perhaps multiple picks on day 2, if you are going to take a luxury selection of a safety at number 18 overall. But Nick Emmanwori at 6'3", 220 pounds, running in the 4.3s, he absolutely has the traits that you're looking for, and especially in a defense like Mike McDonald is going to often be utilizing 3 safeties, sometimes dropping a guy into the box. With his size, then he can be effective in that way. He also has terrific speed, range, instincts in the back end. I mean, this is a guy who was the defensive MVP at a program in South Carolina that's known for churning out NFL prospects. Defensive MVP as a freshman. And then he wound up having 6 interceptions over his career. A couple of those they returned back for touchdowns. And, he jumps into the NFL again and proves himself to be arguably the elite athlete in this entire draft class. So I think, again, to me, that's where you have to start the conversation. I'm also very excited about Malachi Starks from Georgia and what the versatility that he provides. Now, he was coming off a bit of a down season this past year, but in terms of his instincts, his mind, I really do think that he is one of the safer players in this draft class. And I think that his versatility is something that very much will appeal to Mike McDowell and John Schneider as well.
There's still a lot of draft analysts that have Starks being the first safety that is picked in this draft, not Manowari, even though that's not how I have it. But there are a lot of draft experts that are looking at that. And 2 years ago, if Starks would have been in the draft, might be a top 10 pick. And as you said, this year was not as productive, but he's played both safety positions. He has played in the slot. He can blitz. He's a sound tackler. His best asset, though, is his mind. And that's why when people talk about his testing numbers, not that he had bad testing numbers, but he's nowhere near what Nick Manowari is. He is not that type of an athlete, but he plays faster than that because of his instincts, and he's just a football player. The guy loves the game. I think that he's still going to be a top 15, maybe top 20 pick in this draft. I still think Manowari, though, is going to go before him. So if Seahawks fans are wanting him to fall into their lap at 18, I don't know that there's a chance that happens now with what he's done at the combine. And the fact of the matter is, you said, he's been dynamic since he stepped on campus in Columbia. He was their MVP on defense on a team that had a bunch of future draft picks in the last couple seasons on that defense. He has range. He has ball hawking skills. He's a hard hitter. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. I think Nick Manowari is one of the more complete players in this draft class. So he and Starks, those two, I think, are surefire first-round picks. In fact, I would say surefire top 20 selections. I don't know that either one of them gets to the Seahawks. The third name that I want to throw in here, and this is more of the wild card, because when you watch Xavier Watts at Notre Dame, this guy has incredible ball skills, 13 interceptions the last 2 years. If the ball is in his vicinity, he is not just going to break it up. He is going to jump the pass and he's going to intercept it. He has as good of ball hawking skills as any player in this draft class. My big issue with Xavier Watts is that he does not always show up when it comes to making tackles, whether that's in the run game, in coverage. There's a lot of flail and misses on tape with this kid. And that is the big reason why I'm wondering, is he a first rounder or is he somebody that's going to fall into the second or even third round? Because there are teams that is going to be a huge red flag for, saying, look, I know you create turnovers, but in the NFL, you got to be able to tackle. And teams are going to take advantage of safeties that can't. They are going to find ways to put you in conflict where you have to try to make tackles. And if you can't do it, that's a no-no. So Watts is a guy that I think has first-round talent, particularly the ball hawking skills, just the ball skills in general. But if he is not going to put more emphasis on improving his tackling, and there's going to be some teams that I'm sure have asked about that already, he has not been a complete enough player that I think some teams are going to look at him as a first rounder.
No, I 100% agree with you. I personally don't view Xavier Watts as a first-round player just because of the misses as a tackler that you referenced there. And frankly, while I think that he has terrific instincts, he does have incredible ball skills. I mean, he's got very soft hands. He turns and locates the football better than either of the two first-round locks that we're characterizing Nick Manowari and Malachi Starks as. At the same time, again, the struggles in the open field as a tackler to me is frightening, especially when you have a defense like the Seahawks do that relies so much on open field tackling because there is so many kind of complicated roles that Seattle's defense is being asked to do. So one guy missing a tackle could wind up being a long touchdown. And of course, that is the antithesis of what that Mike McDowell is looking to do. So Xavier Watts, again, he is the feast or famine safety of this draft class. You get excited about the ball hawking ability, but at the same time, I also have some reservations about how quickly he is going to be able to get onto the field if he doesn't shore up his open field tackling during training camp.
And the other thing that I will say, at least from a Seahawks perspective, that maybe takes Xavier Watts off of their draft board completely, I do not see him as an interchangeable safety in the NFL. I don't think he is a sound enough tackler, and I don't think he has enough size and physicality to play in the box. And Mike Macdonald demands all of his safeties have to be able to play all over the place. So I just don't know that he is going to be somebody from a Seattle perspective that makes sense. For teams that are looking for a center fielder, a pure free safety, then I think you could certainly envision him being a first-round fit there, and maybe that mitigates some of the concerns you have about the tackling to an extent. But if you're asking him to play up in the box, even in the slot, I mean, his coverage skills would match with that. But when you have a slot corner that cannot tackle, that creates major issues, and teams exploit that. That's why you put somebody like Devin Witherspoon there, because teams are going to take advantage of that if you don't have a clean tackler. So you look at the other two players, Starks and Manowari can play anywhere across the formation. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Manowari could play outside corner with some training. I mean, he's got the athleticism, he's got the ball skills, and both these guys are just football players. And that's not taking a shot at Watts. I think he enjoys the game. I don't have questions about that. But I just don't think he is as complete of a prospect, and the versatility. The other two players have far more versatility than what he brings to the table. But I could still see all three of these players getting picked because, again, there may be other teams that Watts is a better fit for, and maybe Mike Macdonald thinks I can turn him into that. But I would think of Manowari, who they had a 30 with, as well as a combine formal. There's clearly interest there, and I would not be shocked if Malachi Starks is a player that is also on their big board because of his all-around skills and his positional versatility. When we come back, we've got day 2 and day 3 prospects to tackle at the safety position. There's more than just the 3 players we mentioned. Plenty of depth to attack on day 3 and in the second and third round. We'll get to those coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get into the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes it so easy to bet, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. The Warriors, they're going to be in the play-in games. Wish it wasn't that way, but I'm rooting for those guys, and I'm going to be putting down some bets for props for Steph Curry, whether it's three-pointers, steals, or assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. After the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Today, it's all about the safety position. We're back in the secondary, and obviously a very important position in Mike Macdonald's defense. Rob, as you mentioned, and we've talked about this a lot since Macdonald was hired more than a year ago, he loves to play 3 safety sets. So just because Kobe Bryant emerged as a starter and Julian Love has been a Pro Bowl caliber player, that does not mean that they don't have a need for a third safety, especially with Kayvon Wallace and Rayshawn Jenkins both being gone. There is a need to add to that group. Now, maybe it's not in the first couple of rounds, but one thing that makes this safety group intriguing, I think the real meat here is in day 2 when we're talking second and third round prospects, because that may be where Xavier Watts ends up falling. He's kind of that fringe first, early second, mid-second grouping. But there are several safeties that are likely to go in day 2 that have the potential to be able to come in and play right away and offer the positional versatility and flexibility that Mike Macdonald demands at the position.
Yeah, and I am happy that you kind of preface it that way, because like one of my favorite safeties, for example, is a player that you aren't going to see pictured there, Ohio State's Lathan Ransom, but he is more of kind of a classic strong safety. I question his ability to play deep in coverage as effectively as some of the players I'm going to be highlighting here, that I think their positional flexibility is going to be as a free safety, dropping down and playing some strong safety roles, but also being able to provide some backup to Devin Witherspoon at that nickel cornerback spot. And without question, all of these players are going to be special teams kind of guys. I'm going to start off with Billy Bowman from Oklahoma. And he, to me, is the epitome of a playmaker for the same reasons why people are excited about Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. I mean, Bowman was absolutely spectacular in terms of his playmaking ability. I believe he had 11 interceptions over his career. 3 of those were pick sixes, a 100-yard pick six against BYU. Sorry, Nick Lee. But again, he is an absolute playmaker. Another player I like is Andrew Makuba from Texas. He began his college career at Clemson before transferring to Texas this past season. The concern I have with both Bowman and Makuba is just size. They're basically 5'10" for Bowman, 5'11" for Makuba. Makuba is 186 pounds. Bowman is 192 pounds. Corbin, you can count basically on, just your hands here, how many safeties in the NFL weigh in at less than 200. But 2 of my favorites actually are under that range. So that's what's going to be interesting to me here with the Seahawks, because clearly these are players that have ball skills, that have the agility to be able to drop down and play some nickel corner, and also can pound you. But at the same time, because they have relatively short arms, they don't have the range as open field tacklers that maybe some of the top safeties in this draft class possess.
And that's why I want to talk about Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, because this is one of those players that is under the same umbrella as, say, a Siobhan Revel Jr. from East Carolina, or now more recently, Jihaad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama, a guy that is coming off of an injury, another player that had a torn ACL that shortened his season. And the Nittany Lions, they might have made a run for a championship if he wouldn't have gotten hurt. That's how important he was for this defense. And what I love about this kid, not a ton of ball production in terms of interceptions, but he has plenty of pass breakups. He has more size than any of the safeties that you just referenced. Well, he and Ransom are similar build, but Winston has played some deep safety. He can play in the box. He's got a hair on fire, aggressive style, and Penn State missed that down the stretch. They certainly missed having him on defense. And I think there's flexibility for him to be somebody that can do some damage as a blitzer. He is a sound tackler. This is a player that if he wouldn't have been hurt, I think Kevin Winston Jr. might have even been in our first segment when we were talking about potential first-round picks, because he has a more well-rounded, diverse skill set, and he's a little younger player. He was only in his junior season at Penn State. So I think there's going to be some teams on day 2 that look at him as a potential steal if the medicals check out, because he could have been an All-American caliber player if he wouldn't have gotten hurt early. And Penn State certainly missed him. I just think he's got translatable tools to be a guy that could be an effective interchangeable safety at the NFL level, again, as long as the medicals check out.
Yeah, that is obviously a huge question. It's one of the reasons why I would not be surprised at all if Winston was one of the players who either comes to Seattle on a visit or is at minimum brought back to Indianapolis for a medical recheck, because there's going to be a lot of NFL teams who are going to be intrigued by a guy who has his size, 6'2", 220 pounds, and has proven himself to be a very effective player for Penn State, a program that is known for producing high-quality prospects almost regardless of position, but especially like at safety. To me, he reminds me a little bit of a former Penn State safety a couple of years ago, drafted by the Chicago Bears, Jaquan Brisker, who will come down and thump you. And again, I think that's something that the Seahawks are looking for. It's one of the ways that we saw Kobe Bryant really start to prove that he was a safety in the NFL rather than just a cornerback for the Seahawks this past season. You mentioned the All-American kind of pedigree, and that to me is one of the guys that leads me to the conversation about a player that I'm high on that others maybe don't seem to be quite as high on, and that's R.J. Mickens from Clemson. Now, this is the son of one of my absolute favorite players I scouted back in the day, 10-year NFL veteran Ray Mickens. R.J. Mickens is similar in that he is a playmaker. He was a two-time All-ACC player at Clemson. I think that he should have been in consideration to be an All-American given the production that he had. At the same time, again, there are some concerns about his straight line speed. He impressed some people, ran 4.49 seconds, just barely getting under that 4.50 time. That's kind of what I was projecting him as, because there are times where he is left basically trailing in coverage. But because, like we talked about before with Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, Nickens has the awareness to turn, locate the football, high point, take advantage of his size, 6 foot, 199 pounds. Again, a little bit, just a touch taller than some of the other safeties that I mentioned. And again, because he has the agility and he grew up with the NFL lineage, I do believe that he is going to be ready to play in the NFL earlier than some of the other safeties that are going to be drafted ahead of him. I expect Nickens to be available on day 3, just because there are some questions about, does he have the coverage skills to be successful in the NFL? I think that he does. I think he is one of those guys who is, as you said, a good football player, maybe a better football player than an athlete.
Yeah, and I'm going to shift gears to a smaller school. You've talked a lot about these blue blood programs, and obviously they're kicking out good ones. But let's go to Toledo, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what's in the water there, but I've got 3 players with draftable grades for Toledo, and I've talked about 2 of them to this point. But the third one that is going to jump on my list now that I'm really excited to talk about is a player that I actually have watched in person twice in Indiana. He played at New Palestine High School, and I previously coached in Indianapolis. And New Palestine is one of the dominant programs in the Midwest. I mean, they win state titles, it seems like, every year. Great program there. Maxon Hook was playing significant snaps early at Toledo. 7 interceptions the last 3 seasons. He had a sack. He had a couple of tackles for loss, a couple of forced fumbles. He's just one of those guys that isn't necessarily flashy, but you watch and you're like, he's done a lot today. He stuffs the stat sheet, and he is an outstanding leader in the locker room. This is a guy he talked to his high school coach, just how much the rest of the team looked up to him, and they followed his lead. Toledo, the defense, the last 3 years, Maxon Hook has been the guy that has been the leader for them from the secondary. He's a good, not great athlete, but he's very instinctive, and that lets him play fast. He is physical. He doesn't miss very many tackles. I think Maxon Hook is maybe the safety in this class that is hovering under the radar the most, that people should be talking about. And he played well at the Senior Bowl, too. This is a guy that I think is very much on the draft radar. And if you are looking for a big-bodied safety who is really out in left field right now, that's not being talked about a lot, he's not near the athlete that Nick Emanuwari is, but Malik Verdon from Iowa State. There's another program. Iowa State's going to have 6 or 7 dudes drafted this year. I mean, that was a good football team last year with a lot of experienced players. Verdon is 6'3", over 215 pounds, another big safety. I don't know that he's going to be a guy that you can play deep in the NFL, but I think in terms of being that money linebacker that can come up and stick people, can blitz, can help you with the run in sub packages, I think that Verdon has value as a late day 3 selection. Again, he is not the athlete that Nick Emanuwari is. I mean, nobody really is at the safety position, but he's still a big body that's a sure tackler, played in a lot of games at Iowa State, another high character player. Verdon is a guy that I think could make a lot of sense for the Seahawks. If they're looking for a plug safety in terms of that money linebacker spot late in the draft, that he would be the one that stands out from his size and his physicality.
Yeah, it's a good point. He's a good player. He's also not the dynamic athlete that the last player I'm going to be mentioning here absolutely is. Now, there's definitely been a theme along with the blue blood programs, as you mentioned. I've been talking about guys from all of these, basically playoff perennial contender kind of teams. I want to mention a player, Keaton Crawford, who wound up becoming an all Mountain West Conference selection this past season, but that was after signing with the University of Texas, and he basically just rode the bench for 4 years. I think he had 4 starts entering this past season. But at the same time, in terms of shining the light on himself when he needed to, again, he was an all-conference pick for a bad Nevada Wolfpack football team this past year. Goes the combine, absolutely lights it up, and the 4 threes on some watches, 4 fours certainly at minimum. And you just see a guy that can really change directions and accelerate in a blink. And I do think that is the type of interchangeable safety that has the range for coverage. You think about the slot receivers, the tight ends in this division. I think that is of critical importance to the Seahawks in particular. So Keaton Crawford from Nevada now, but originally from Texas. All 4 of the players that I highlighted here, Corbin, actually played their prep ball in the great state of Texas. So maybe Seattle is going to be kind of thinking, going back to their Earl Thomas days, and not necessarily a Longhorn, but a Texas-born and bred kind of a player to add a little bit more pop to the Seattle secondary.
And I'll say this, adding on with Crawford too, for those that say, well, he could not get on the field at Texas's DBU, their backups and third stringers are better than most of the country's safeties and cornerbacks are. It can be tricky to get on the field there. And I think it's incredibly impressive when a guy stands out for a bad football team. Think Cortez Kennedy winning Defensive Player of the Year when the Seahawks went 2-12 that season. Yep. This is a similar situation to the college level where if you turned on the tape and watched Nevada, that team was unsightly. I mean, it was difficult to watch them, but Crawford always jumped out as a positive, and he clearly's got the tools. He could very well be a guy that has a way better NFL career than college just because he doesn't have the roadblocks in front of him that were future high draft picks in Texas secondary. So he is absolutely somebody that would make sense, and he's played both safety spots. He's played the slot, so he's got that interchangeability that Mike McDonald covets. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Ring. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we return tomorrow, we are going to continue our position by position review, and we are going to be going back to the offensive line. We're going to talk some tackles tomorrow, Rob. We've talked guards, we talked centers. It's all about tackles tomorrow. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.